This is the first photograph that I took that I was really proud of. Hi, my name is Robin Hill. I've been a photographer for 35 years, but I'd already been a professional photographer for 8 years before I took this photograph. It's got quite a story behind it, and I want to tell you a little bit about that story today. The subject in the photograph, his name was Taylor Clifton. He was an amazing dancer, and he used to dance with the Harlem Dance Troupe in New York in the 1980s, and he was also a very favored model of the terrific photographer Robert Mapplethorpe. In the early 1990s, he moved down here to South Beach in Miami, and he set up his own dance troupe. And a friend of mine, Barbara Drake, she was one of the dancers in his company, and she invited me and my late wife over to Espanola Way to experience one of their performances. Anyway, the performance was extremely avant-garde. I'd never seen anything quite like it. It consisted of 7 or 8 dancers prancing around the dance floor with empty TVs on their heads. I think the piece was called Talking Heads or something like that. Anyway, I was really quite taken with it, and I was particularly impressed with the dancer Taylor's moves. I'd never seen anybody move in that way. He had a very unique way of dancing. And I introduced myself to him afterwards, and we connected. Over the next couple of years, we would meet each other at parties and what have you. And we became almost friends, I suppose, really, like acquaintances, always happy to see each other on the street, that kind of thing. But in 1994, I was listening to a classic album of jazz music by Miles Davis. It's called Kind of Blue. And there's something in one of those tracks there where Miles Davis and John Coltrane are performing on the same track, and I suddenly realized what they were doing. They were improvising in the moment, taking a melody to completely a different place. They were soaring like eagles. And then something struck me, and I said to myself, you know what? Maybe I can apply that philosophy to my photography. So, with this thought, I call up Taylor and I said, Taylor, you know, I've always thought you were a tremendously photogenic fellow, and I'd like to take your photograph. And he sort of reluctantly agreed. And the next day, I said, okay, I'm going to meet you at the beach at 75th and Collins. Just come and meet me about 7:30. So he came along, and I said to him, Taylor, I just kind of want to reenact what I'd heard yesterday on the Miles Davis album. And I said to him, don't dance to anything you learned at the Harlem Dance Troupe. Don't do something that Merce Cunningham may have taught you. Just do your own thing. Be your true agent of freedom that you really are as an artist. He said, okay. So he started to dance around. And then he started doing these giant leaps above the water. It's called a grand jeté. And luckily, I was underneath him at one stage with a wide-angle lens, and I caught him at the apex of the leap. And that's what this piece is called, The Leap. And I knew I had something special, but back in those days, of course, it was all on film, so I had to wait 24 hours to get the film back. So the next day, I'm going through the film, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, that's pretty nice. Yeah, that picture's pretty good. And then this one came up, frame 19, right in the middle of the roll of film. And I knew I had something special. And I said, okay, I gotta go over to Taylor to show him. So I rap at his door and I said, Taylor, you gotta see this photograph. So I showed him the photograph, and he looked at it and he said, wow, Robin, I think even Robert Mapplethorpe would have been proud of this one. And as of that moment, I applied that philosophy of photography, philosophy of jazz music, to my photography. And I've been doing it for 27 years ever since. So what happens next is a really rather sad story, but I just want to relate this to you. Taylor and I remained friends, but after a couple of years, he contracted AIDS, and he was not doing very well. So a couple of friends and myself, we went over to Jackson Memorial to see him, and he wasn't doing so good. He was dying. And I said to him, I had the opportunity to say to him, you know, Taylor, I'm really grateful that that day you came out with me so that you and I have this memory, and that, you know, we created a piece of art together that I think will outlive both of us. And he said, no, thank you, Robin. Thank you. 2 days later, Taylor passed away, as so many other friends had during that terrible time. And I would say about 6 months later, I get a phone call out of the blue from my friend Dennis Edwards. And Dennis is very big in philanthropy down here in South Florida. And he said, Robin, I saw your photograph that you took of Taylor, you know, and I'd like to use it for an organization that I'm representing at the moment. It's called Dance for Life. And I said, Dennis, that sounds fantastic, but I've never heard of Dance for Life. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about its mission. And he says, well, Dance for Life, it raises money for dancers living with AIDS. I knew that that moment was coming across the universe. I knew Taylor was talking to me. Something had come full circle that told me, you know, sometimes you're doing something in your art and you have no idea what's going to happen to it next. You don't know that it's going to have a larger life than just me taking a photograph because I had an inspiration with the Miles Davis album. So that photograph became the talisman for that company, and it started raising money for Dance for Life. It also then appeared on a couple of sort of new age books, because the feeling behind it is strongly spiritual. It has a feeling of enlightenment about it. But my main message here, I suppose, is that when you find your creative flow, as I did this day, and continue to do so, it's not so much that you're looking for the path, you just allow the path to come to you. So that's my message today, and thank you very much for listening. Safe journey, my friends.